Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today, we are diving into one of the most beloved animated worlds of all time with Toy Story 5, the highly anticipated 2026 sequel that brings Woody, Buzz Lightyear, Jessie, and the rest of the toys together for another emotional and exciting adventure. Set 2 years after the events of Toy Story 4, this new chapter explores a very different challenge for Bonnie's toys. Their biggest problem is no longer simply finding a child to play with. It is competing with a new kind of technology that has captured Bonnie's attention. When a tablet named Lillipad becomes Bonnie's new favorite plaything, Jessie, Woody, Buzz, and the other toys are forced to confront a world where traditional toys may no longer be the center of a child's imagination. In this video, we are going to explain the story of Toy Story 5 in detail, explore the major characters, discuss the emotional moments, exciting conflicts, humor, themes, and important lessons hidden throughout the movie. We will also look at how this new adventure continues, the journey of these unforgettable characters, and whether this latest chapter lives up to the legacy of the Toy Story franchise. So, sit back, relax, and let's begin our complete journey into Toy Story 5. Toy Story 5 begins by showing us a world that feels familiar, but has quietly changed. Bonnie is no longer the little girl we remember from the earlier adventures. She is now 8 years old, growing more independent and becoming increasingly aware of the world around her. Her toys are still nearby, but their lives have entered a completely different stage. Woody is no longer living permanently in Bonnie's room. After the events of the previous movie, he has chosen a new purpose alongside Bo Peep, traveling from place to place and helping toys who have been forgotten, abandoned, or separated from children. Woody has discovered that being a toy does not necessarily mean staying in one bedroom forever. Sometimes a toy's purpose can be found by helping other toys find their own children. Meanwhile, back at Bonnie's home, Jessie has taken on a much larger responsibility. Woody's old sheriff badge has become a symbol of leadership, and Jessie is determined to protect Bonnie and keep the remaining toys together. Buzz Lightyear remains one of her closest allies, and the other familiar toys continue trying to make the most of their time with Bonnie. But something is different. Bonnie is growing up, and her relationship with her toys is beginning to change. She still loves imagination, but she is becoming more interested in the things that other children her age are interested in. Her parents notice that Bonnie is having difficulty connecting with some of the children around her. Technology has become an important part of childhood, and screens are everywhere. Bonnie watches other children communicate through tablets and digital platforms, and she begins wondering whether she is somehow falling behind. This becomes especially important when her parents decide that a new piece of technology might help her socialize. That new arrival is Lillipad, a frog-shaped smart tablet designed to be much more interactive than an ordinary device. From the moment Lillipad enters Bonnie's room, the balance among the toys begins to change. Unlike a traditional toy, Lillipad can communicate, search for information, connect Bonnie with other children, and constantly offer something new. She does not simply sit on a shelf waiting for Bonnie to pick her up. She responds whenever Bonnie interacts with her, which immediately gives her an advantage over the traditional toys. The toys watch this development with growing concern. At first, they do not necessarily understand why Lillipad is so dangerous to their place in Bonnie's life. After all, she is not technically a toy in the traditional sense. She cannot run around the bedroom, join Bonnie's imaginary adventures in the same way, or experience the physical world like Jessie, Buzz, and the others. Yet Lillipad has something the toys cannot easily compete with. She can adapt instantly to what Bonnie wants. If Bonnie is curious, Lillipad can answer. If Bonnie feels lonely, Lillipad can help her communicate. If Bonnie wants entertainment, Lillipad can provide it. The device seems capable of becoming whatever Bonnie needs at any particular moment. Jessie finds this deeply unsettling. She has worked hard to become the kind of toy Bonnie can depend on, and she believes that a toy's greatest strength is the emotional bond it creates with its child. To Jessie, play is not simply entertainment. It is a language between a child and a toy. Through imagination, Bonnie can turn an ordinary bedroom into an entire universe. But now Jessie is watching Bonnie spend more and more time staring at a glowing screen. The situation becomes even more uncomfortable when Lillipad begins helping Bonnie communicate with other children. Lilypad's ability to connect Bonnie with classmates makes Bonnie feel more socially involved, and Bonnie quickly becomes fascinated by everything the tablet can do. Jessie realizes that this is not simply a temporary distraction. Lilypad is becoming part of Bonnie's daily routine. The toys begin discussing what they should do. Some are frightened that Bonnie may eventually stop playing with them completely. Others try to remain optimistic. After all, children change their interests all the time. A toy can become forgotten for weeks and then suddenly become important again. Jessie wants to believe this will happen with Bonnie, but deep inside, she fears that this situation is different because technology does not simply replace one toy with another. It can occupy an enormous part of a child's attention. Jessie eventually decides that she needs advice from the one person who understands this kind of situation better than anyone, Woody. She finds a way to contact him using the toy's communication system. When Woody hears Jessie's concerns, he immediately realizes that something serious is happening. He has been away from Bonnie for a long time, but his feelings toward her have never disappeared. Woody understands that Jessie would not contact him unless she truly needed him. Woody's decision to return becomes the first major turning point of the story. His life with Bo Peep and the Toy Rescue Group has given him a new sense of purpose, but hearing Jessie's voice reminds him that Bonnie's room is still part of his emotional home. He cannot simply ignore the possibility that the toys he once protected are in trouble. When Woody finally returns, his reunion with Buzz is filled with the warmth and humor that has always defined their friendship. Yet there is also an uncomfortable realization between them. The old problems they faced, Sid, dangerous moving vehicles, greedy collectors, and abandoned toys were physical threats. This new challenge is much harder to understand. Lilypad is not evil simply because she is technology. In fact, she genuinely seems interested in helping Bonnie. That makes the conflict much more complicated. Woody studies Lilypad carefully. Jessie believes the tablet is taking Bonnie away from them, while Woody begins to wonder whether the real problem is not Lilypad herself, but the way everyone is reacting to change. Buzz, meanwhile, is ready to approach the situation as if it were another mission. He sees the arrival of new technology as a challenge and believes the toys need a strategy. Jessie is not convinced that strategy alone will solve anything. She is emotionally attached to her role as Bonnie's favorite toy, and the fear of being replaced makes her increasingly determined to prove that traditional toys still matter. Lilypad, however, does not appear to understand why Jessie feels threatened. From Lilypad's perspective, she is simply doing what she was designed to do, help Bonnie. This creates one of the film's central ideas. For the first time, the toys are forced to confront a rival that does not necessarily want to destroy them. Lilypad is simply another presence competing for Bonnie's attention, and she believes she is helping their child. The traditional toys see her as a threat, while Lilypad sees herself as an ally. As Bonnie becomes increasingly absorbed in her tablet, Jessie realizes that simply trying to make Lilypad disappear would not solve the deeper problem. Bonnie is changing, and the toys need to understand what she actually needs. Woody encourages Jessie to think beyond the fear of losing Bonnie. The important question is not whether the toys can defeat technology. The important question is whether they can still give Bonnie something that technology cannot provide. The answer will require the toys to leave their comfort zone once again. Woody, Buzz, Jessie, Bullseye, and the others will face separation, unexpected partnerships, and situations that force them to rethink what it means to be a toy. Most importantly, Jessie will have to discover that being important to Bonnie does not mean being the only thing Bonnie loves. The arrival of Lilypad has therefore changed everything. Bonnie has entered a new stage of childhood. Woody has returned to an old home with a new perspective. Jessie is struggling with the fear of becoming unnecessary, and Buzz is preparing for another mission. The toys may believe they are fighting to save playtime, but their real challenge is much more personal. They must learn how to remain part of Bonnie's life while allowing her to grow. And as the story moves forward, the toys discover that the greatest threat is not a tablet, a screen, or technology itself. The greatest danger is forgetting why toys matter in the first place. As the story continues, the arrival of Lilypad creates a growing tension inside Bonnie's bedroom. The toys can see that Bonnie is spending more time with the tablet, and every new feature seems to make it harder for them to capture her imagination. Jessie takes the situation personally because she has always believed that being Bonnie's toy means being someone Bonnie can trust, someone who can share adventures with her even when nobody else is around. Now she watches Bonnie carry Lillipad from one room to another, talk to the device, ask it questions, and become fascinated by everything it can offer. Jessie tries to remain confident in front of the other toys, but her frustration slowly becomes impossible to hide. Buzz notices the change immediately and reminds Jessie that toys have faced difficult situations before. However, Jessie understands that this challenge is different. They cannot simply defeat Lillipad because there is no villain to defeat. Lillipad has not entered Bonnie's life with the intention of taking anyone's place. She is simply becoming important because she can give Bonnie experiences that the traditional toys cannot provide. Woody begins to understand that Jessie's greatest fear is not really Lillipad. Her real fear is being forgotten. Woody has experienced that feeling himself, especially after Andy grew up and moved on. He remembers how painful it was to realize that a child can love a toy deeply and still eventually move into another stage of life. Instead of telling Jessie that everything will remain exactly as it was, Woody tries to help her accept the fact that change is unavoidable. He explains that a toy's purpose is not necessarily to remain the favorite forever. Sometimes a toy's greatest achievement is helping a child during one particular chapter of childhood, but Jessie does not want to hear that. She believes Bonnie still needs them, and she refuses to accept that technology might slowly push them into the background. Buzz approaches the problem differently. His natural instinct is to treat the situation like a mission. He starts observing Lillipad and trying to understand how the device works. The other toys join him, each contributing ideas about how they can attract Bonnie's attention without damaging their relationship with her. Their plans are often humorous because the toys still think in terms of physical play, while Lillipad can respond instantly to Bonnie's changing interests. Every time the toys create an elaborate imaginary scenario, Bonnie can become distracted by something appearing on the tablet. The toys gradually realize that simply competing for attention is exhausting them and may even make Bonnie feel pressured. Meanwhile, Lillipad begins noticing that something unusual is happening around her. Although she is a digital device, she has become increasingly aware of the toys' presence and behavior. She does not completely understand why they seem suspicious of her. From her perspective, she is helping Bonnie. She gives Bonnie information, helps her communicate, and provides entertainment whenever she wants it. Lillipad believes that the more useful she becomes, the happier Bonnie will be. This creates an interesting contrast between her understanding of friendship and the toys' understanding of love. The toys believe friendship requires shared physical experiences, imagination, sacrifice, and emotional memories. Lillipad initially believes friendship is about being available whenever someone needs you. Bonnie herself becomes caught between these two worlds. She still loves the toys, but she also enjoys the freedom that Lillipad gives her. The tablet allows her to discover new interests and communicate in ways that feel exciting and modern. At the same time, Bonnie occasionally looks toward Jessie and the others with affection, showing that her connection to them has not disappeared. The problem is that Bonnie does not fully understand the fear growing inside her toys. She sees her different interests as perfectly normal, while the toys interpret every moment of screen time as evidence that they are losing her. Woody tries to make Jessie understand that Bonnie's changing interests are not a rejection. He remembers his own experience with Andy and explains that children grow in ways toys cannot control. What matters is whether the relationship survives that change. Jessie slowly begins to realize that trying to force Bonnie back into the past would actually be unfair to her. Bonnie deserves to discover new things, even if those discoveries make her spend less time playing with her old toys. The situation becomes more complicated when Bonnie's increasing dependence on Lillipad begins affecting the entire household. Her parents notice how strongly she is attached to the tablet, and they become concerned about how much time she is spending with it. The toys also notice that Bonnie sometimes becomes so focused on the digital world that she stops paying attention to what is happening around her. This is the first moment when Jessie begins to realize that her goal should not be defeating Lillipad. Instead, Perhaps the toys need to help Bonnie find balance. However, before Jessie can fully accept this idea, an unexpected situation separates the toys from their familiar environment. What begins as an ordinary day turns into another adventure when the toys are forced to move through a world that is much larger than Bonnie's bedroom. The experience reminds them of the older Toy Story adventures, where an apparently simple problem could quickly become a dangerous journey. Buzz immediately becomes excited by the possibility of a mission, while Jessie realizes that she has to take responsibility for keeping everyone together. Woody remains calm, but he can sense that this journey will test the group in a way they have never experienced before. He has spent years learning that being a leader does not mean controlling everyone. A leader sometimes has to step back and allow others to make their own choices. Jessie, however, is still struggling with that lesson because she is afraid of losing Bonnie. She wants to control the situation and make sure everything goes according to plan. The journey also creates an opportunity for Woody and Jessie to have a deeper conversation. Woody admits that leaving Bonnie was one of the hardest decisions he ever made, but he also explains that leaving did not mean he stopped caring. His purpose changed. He learned that a toy can continue making a difference even after leaving the child who once loved it. Jessie begins to see that her own future may eventually change too. And while that thought scares her, it also gives her a new sense of possibility. At the same time, Buzz discovers that Lillipad may not be as simple as everyone assumed. The tablet is capable of learning from Bonnie's behavior, and this makes her increasingly independent in the way she interacts with the world. Buzz initially treats this as a potential threat, but he eventually starts questioning whether the toys have misunderstood Lillipad. If she truly wants to help Bonnie, then perhaps the toys and Lillipad do not need to be enemies. This realization becomes one of the most important developments in the story. Woody encourages everyone to stop asking who should win Bonnie's attention and start asking what Bonnie actually needs. Jessie slowly accepts that Bonnie does not have to choose between technology and traditional toys. She can enjoy both. The toys simply need to find a way to remind Bonnie that imagination cannot be replaced by a screen. The group begins working together in a new way. Instead of competing directly with Lillipad, they start using their own strengths. They create opportunities for Bonnie to interact with the physical world, encourage imaginative play, and remind her of the emotional memories they have built together. Lillipad, meanwhile, begins understanding that being useful is not the same as being someone's entire world. The toy's greatest discovery is that play has never depended on the object itself. A cardboard box can become a spaceship. A blanket can become a castle. A simple toy can become a best friend. What makes these things special is the imagination of the child using them. Technology can provide endless information and entertainment, but it cannot automatically create the same emotional history that Bonnie has built with Jessie, Buzz, Woody, and the others. Jessie finally begins to let go of her fear. She understands that Bonnie loving something new does not erase the love she already has for her toys. This does not mean the conflict disappears immediately, but it changes the way Jessie approaches it. Instead of trying to protect her position as Bonnie's favorite, she begins thinking about what kind of toy she wants to be for Bonnie. As the adventure continues, the toys face new obstacles that force them to cooperate. Woody provides experience and emotional guidance. Buzz contributes courage and determination. Jessie becomes more confident as a leader, and Lillipad slowly discovers that she can become part of the solution rather than the source of the problem. Their differences, which initially divided them, eventually become their greatest strength. The central conflict of Toy Story 5 therefore begins shifting away from the simple idea of old toys versus new technology. The deeper story becomes about growing up, adapting, and understanding that relationships can change without disappearing. Bonnie is entering a new stage of childhood, and the toys must grow alongside her rather than trying to keep her trapped in the past. For Jessie, this lesson is especially important. She finally starts understanding what Woody has known for years. The love between a child and a toy is not measured by how many hours they spend together. It is measured by the memories they create and the impact they leave behind. And as the toys prepare for the next stage of their journey, Jessie realizes that her greatest responsibility is not keeping Bonnie from changing. It is making sure that, wherever Bonnie's imagination takes her, the toys are ready to be part of that journey when she needs The conflict between the traditional toys and Lillipad becomes more complicated as everyone begins to understand that Bonnie's changing interests are only one part of a much bigger problem. Jessie has spent so much time worrying about losing Bonnie's attention that she has not noticed how much pressure Bonnie herself is feeling. Bonnie is growing older, trying to understand friendships, school, technology, and the expectations surrounding her, and she does not always know how to express what she is feeling. Lillipad becomes attractive to her because the tablet seems to offer immediate answers and constant entertainment, while the toys represent something slower and more imaginative. Woody recognizes that Bonnie does not need the toys to compete with technology. She needs them to remind her that she can create her own world instead of simply consuming someone else's. This realization changes the attitude of the group. Jessie becomes less focused on proving that she is still Bonnie's favorite and more interested in helping Bonnie feel comfortable with the changes happening around her. Buzz also begins to understand that his mission-oriented approach cannot solve every emotional problem. He may be excellent at dealing with danger, but Bonnie's feelings cannot be treated like an enemy that needs to be defeated. The toys therefore decide to work together in a different way. Instead of interrupting Bonnie whenever she uses Lillipad, they begin creating opportunities for her to rediscover the excitement of physical imagination. They wait for the right moments, hoping Bonnie will naturally return to them rather than feeling forced to choose. Lillipad notices the change. At first, she does not understand why the toys have stopped treating her as an enemy. She has become accustomed to their suspicion, so their new cooperation makes her curious. Woody eventually makes it clear that they do not hate her. They simply fear what her presence represents. Lillipad begins to understand that she has become a symbol of Bonnie growing up, and that is something even the toys cannot stop. This conversation helps establish an unexpected relationship between Lillipad and the traditional toys. They remain very different, but they begin recognizing that they share the same basic purpose, helping Bonnie. Jessie is particularly affected by this development. She remembers the way Woody once protected the toys and realizes that true leadership sometimes means accepting uncomfortable truths. She cannot promise that Bonnie will always play with her. She cannot promise that the toys will remain the center of Bonnie's world forever. What she can promise is that whenever Bonnie needs them, they will be there. That realization gives Jessie a confidence she did not have at the beginning of the story. The group soon finds itself facing another challenge that takes them away from the safety of Bonnie's room. The adventure becomes a reminder that the Toy Story universe is always larger than the toys imagine. Ordinary objects become obstacles. Familiar surroundings suddenly look enormous, and a simple attempt to solve a problem turns into a complicated journey. Buzz enjoys the excitement, while the other toys struggle to keep everyone moving in the same direction. Woody remains the calm center of the group, but even he realizes that he cannot solve everything himself. During the journey, Jessie takes greater responsibility. Earlier, her fear of losing Bonnie caused her to act impulsively, but now she begins making decisions based on what is best for everyone. Buzz recognizes her growth and starts trusting her judgment more. Their partnership becomes stronger, and the other toys begin following Jessie without questioning whether she is capable of leading them. This is important because Jessie is no longer simply filling Woody's old position. She is becoming her own kind of leader. Meanwhile, Lillipad experiences something she has never experienced before: uncertainty. Unlike the toys, she cannot physically move through the world on her own. She depends on others to carry her, protect her, and keep her functioning. This forces her to understand what vulnerability means. She begins seeing why the toys value physical friendship so much. When one toy falls, another toy reaches out. When someone is frightened, the others stay close. Their friendship is not based on usefulness alone. It is based on loyalty. Lillipad also starts understanding that constantly providing entertainment can sometimes prevent a person from discovering something for themselves. Bonnie does not always need another answer or another activity. Sometimes she simply needs time to imagine, think, explore, or talk to someone face to face. This becomes an important lesson for Lillipad, who gradually shifts from trying to keep Bonnie engaged every second to helping Bonnie find a healthier balance. The toys themselves are also forced to change. Some of them have spent years believing that their identity depends entirely on being Bonnie's toys. Now they realize that being a toy can mean more than belonging to one child. Woody has already discovered this through his life with Bo Peep, and Jessie is beginning to understand it. A toy can have different chapters. One chapter may involve being a child's favorite companion, another may involve helping a forgotten toy find a new home, and another may involve simply being there when someone needs comfort. As the adventure progresses, the group becomes more united. Their original divisions begin disappearing. Woody no longer sees himself as the person who must solve everything. Jessie no longer believes she must protect Bonnie from every change. Buzz stops treating every unfamiliar situation as a mission requiring a direct attack. Lillipad stops viewing herself as the perfect solution to every problem. Each character begins accepting their limitations, and that acceptance makes them stronger. Bonnie eventually notices that something has changed. She begins spending time with the toys again, not because her parents tell her to and not because Jessie or the others force her, but because she genuinely wants to. She remembers how much fun it is to create stories with her toys. A simple object can become a character, a room can become a magical kingdom, and a group of toys can become an entire community. These moments remind Bonnie that imagination is something she controls herself. At the same time, Bonnie does not completely abandon Lillipad. She continues using the tablet because it is useful and entertaining. The story deliberately avoids presenting technology as something purely bad. Instead, it shows that technology can be helpful when it supports a child's life rather than replacing real-world experiences. Lillipad becomes a bridge between two different kinds of play rather than a replacement for the old toys. Woody watches Bonnie from a distance and feels something familiar. He remembers Andy and understands that children do not stay the same forever. The greatest mistake a toy can make is believing that love means preventing change. Love can also mean allowing someone to grow. Woody knows that one day Bonnie may grow beyond all of them, just as Andy did, but that possibility no longer terrifies him as much as it once did. He has learned that memories can survive even when circumstances change. Jessie has a similar realization. She looks at Woody and understands why he was always willing to let go when the time was right. His decision was never about abandoning the people he loved. It was about recognizing when they needed something different. Jessie now understands that her job is not to keep Bonnie in the past but to accompany her into the future for as long as she can. The adventure reaches a point where the toys must make an important choice. They can continue fighting against the changes around them, or they can embrace those changes and find a new purpose. The decision is not easy because accepting change means accepting uncertainty, but the toys choose to move forward together. They realize that the strongest friendships are not destroyed by differences. They become stronger when people learn how to respect those differences. Lillipad becomes an unexpected member of this new group. She will never be exactly like the traditional toys, and they will never operate like a digital device, but they no longer need to. Each has something different to offer Bonnie. The toys give her imagination, physical play, emotional connection, and memories. Lillipad gives her information, communication, discovery, and new opportunities. Together, they can help Bonnie experience childhood from different perspectives. By the end of this chapter, the toys have changed more than Bonnie has. They entered the adventure believing they were fighting to keep their place in her life. They gradually discover that their real purpose is much bigger. They are there to help Bonnie grow, to make her laugh, to comfort her when she is scared, and to give her a safe space where her imagination can exist without limits. But the journey is far from finished. The changes surrounding Bonnie have only exposed the beginning of a much larger challenge, and Jessie realizes that the toys will soon have to make decisions about their own futures. Woody has already chosen a life beyond one child's bedroom. Now the others must consider what their own next. As the adventure continues, the toys begin to realize that their biggest challenge is not simply keeping Bonnie interested in them. The real challenge is understanding how childhood itself is changing around them. Jessie has become more confident since the beginning of the story, but she still carries a quiet fear that one day, Bonnie will stop needing her completely. Woody notices this and reminds Jessie that being needed is not the only measure of a toy's importance. Sometimes a toy can matter simply because of the memories it helped create. Jessie understands the words, but accepting them emotionally is much harder. She has always defined herself through her relationship with her child, and now she must discover who she is when that relationship begins to change. Bonnie, meanwhile, is experiencing her own transformation. She is becoming more curious and independent, and her world is expanding beyond her bedroom. School, friends, technology, and new interests are all competing for her attention. Lillipad has become an important part of this new world because she can provide information and communication whenever Bonnie wants them. However, the more Bonnie relies on the tablet, the more the toys understand that they need to show her something technology cannot provide. They cannot compete with Lillipad by offering more information or more digital entertainment. Their strength lies in imagination, emotion, and physical connection. Woody encourages the toys to stop thinking about what they have lost and start thinking about what they can still give. The group begins creating new opportunities for Bonnie to play. Instead of trying to recreate the games she enjoyed when she was younger, they allow her imagination to develop naturally. The toys become characters in new stories rather than simply repeating old adventures. This makes Jessie realize that play itself has not disappeared. It has simply changed as Bonnie has changed. Buzz becomes especially enthusiastic about this new approach. He sees every imaginative game as a new mission, and his dramatic interpretation of ordinary events creates several humorous situations. The other toys sometimes laugh at his seriousness, but Buzz's determination helps keep everyone motivated. He also begins recognizing that his friendship with Woody has changed over the years. In the past, Buzz often depended on Woody to tell him what was right. Now he is capable of making his own decisions and helping others without waiting for Woody to take control. The relationship between Woody and Jessie also becomes more meaningful. Woody sees that Jessie is becoming the kind of leader he once was, but he does not want her to simply imitate him. He wants her to discover her own way of leading. Jessie learns that she does not have to be fearless to be a good leader. She can be frightened, uncertain, and emotional while still making brave decisions. This becomes especially important when the toys face another unexpected separation. During one part of the adventure, the toys become scattered, forcing them to rely on their individual strengths. Jessie takes responsibility for finding the others, while Buzz tries to protect the more vulnerable toys. Woody focuses on finding a safe way back to Bonnie. Lillipad, who once seemed like the outsider, unexpectedly becomes important because she can help the group understand where Bonnie is and what she is doing. For the first time, the toys realize that Lillipad's abilities can actually support their mission. This changes their relationship permanently. Lillipad no longer feels like an intruder, and the toys no longer treat her as a replacement for themselves. Instead, she becomes a different kind of companion. She cannot experience childhood exactly as they do, but she can help connect Bonnie to people and ideas beyond the bedroom. The toys begin to understand that their goal was never to make Bonnie choose one form of play. Their goal was to help her experience childhood in a meaningful way. Jessie is the first to fully embrace this idea. She realizes that Bonnie can love her toys and enjoy technology at the same time. There is no rule saying that a child can only have one favorite thing. Jessie remembers her own feelings of abandonment and understands why she reacted so strongly when Lillipad arrived. She had been afraid that history was repeating itself, but Woody helps her see that Bonnie is not Andy, and this story does not have to end the way the previous chapter of Woody's life ended. At the same time, Bonnie starts recognizing the value of her toys in a new way. She may not play with them every minute, but when she does, the experience feels more personal. She creates stories instead of simply watching stories. She decides what happens instead of following something already designed for her. This distinction becomes one of the film's most important messages. Imagination requires participation. It encourages children to invent, experiment, and make mistakes. The toys represent that freedom. Lillipad slowly begins learning from Bonnie's behavior. She sees that when Bonnie invents a game with Jessie, Bonnie becomes more active and expressive. When she talks with Buzz, she laughs differently. When she creates a story involving Woody, she draws on memories from her childhood. Lillipad begins understanding that the toys are not merely objects. They are connected to Bonnie's personal history. This realization gives Lillipad a new perspective on her own role. She does not have memories with Bonnie in the same way the toys do, but but she can still become part of Bonnie's future. Instead of trying to replace the toys, she begins helping Bonnie discover new activities that can involve them. This cooperation turns the original conflict into something much more positive. However, the toys still face uncertainty about what happens next. Woody has already chosen a life outside Bonnie's home, and his return has reminded everyone that toys can have different futures. Jessie begins wondering whether she should eventually follow a similar path. Buzz also starts considering what his purpose might be if Bonnie continues growing older. These questions do not have immediate answers, but they become part of the group's conversations. Woody tells them that they should not rush their decisions. A toy does not need to know its entire future. What matters is recognizing the opportunities that appear in front of it. He explains that his own journey did not happen according to a plan. Every major change in his life came from a moment when he had to choose between holding on and moving forward. Now the other toys are reaching similar crossroads. Jessie finds this both frightening and exciting. For years, she believed the happiest ending would be remaining Bonnie's favorite toy forever. Now she begins to imagine that happiness could take other forms. Maybe she can remain with Bonnie for many years. Maybe she can help another child someday. Maybe she can join Woody and Bo Peep in helping other toys. The possibilities are endless. And for the first time, Jessie does not see that uncertainty as something terrible. The group's journey eventually brings them back toward Bonnie's world, but they return with a completely different attitude. They are no longer frightened by Lilypad's presence. They are no longer obsessed with being the center of Bonnie's attention. They have learned that their greatest strength is the bond they share with one another and the memories they have created with Bonnie. When Bonnie finally spends time with the toys again, the moment is not presented as a victory over technology. Instead, it feels like a peaceful reunion between a child and the characters who have been part of her life. Bonnie's smile shows that the connection is still there. She does not need to choose between the old and the new. She can carry both into the future. Jessie watches Bonnie play and feels a sense of relief. She finally understands that growing up does not mean forgetting everything from childhood. Some things remain important precisely because they helped shape who we become. The toys may eventually move into different chapters, but the love behind their relationship with Bonnie cannot simply disappear. Woody is proud of Jessie because she has learned the lesson he spent years discovering. A toy's purpose is not to possess a child. A toy's purpose is to make a child's world a little brighter. Sometimes that means being the center of an adventure. Sometimes it means sitting quietly in a room until the child needs comfort. And sometimes it means stepping aside and allowing the child to discover something new. The story now moves toward a deeper emotional conflict. Although the toys have found a temporary balance, they know Bonnie will continue growing. Lilypad is only the beginning of the changes ahead. The question is no longer whether the toys can defeat technology. The question is whether they can continue adapting as Bonnie's life changes. Jessie looks around at Buzz, Woody, and the other toys and realizes that their greatest adventure may not be about saving their place in Bonnie's childhood. It may be about discovering what their lives can become beyond it. And with that realization, the toys prepare for the next stage of their journey, knowing that whatever happens, they will face it together. The toys return to Bonnie's room with a completely different understanding of what is happening around them. Earlier, they had treated Lilypad as the enemy, believing that every minute Bonnie spent with the tablet was one more minute stolen from them. Now they begin to see the situation from Bonnie's perspective. She is growing up, discovering new interests, and learning how to navigate a world that is much larger than the one she knew when she was younger. Her toys are still important to her, but they cannot expect her childhood to remain frozen in time. Jessie especially begins to understand that her responsibility is not to prevent Bonnie from changing but to support her as she changes. Bonnie continues using Lilypad, but the relationship between them has become more balanced. Lilypad is no longer trying to occupy every moment of Bonnie's attention, and Bonnie begins using the tablet for practical things while returning to her toys when she wants imaginative play. This difference is important because it shows that the toys have not actually lost their place. They simply have to share Bonnie's world with new experiences. Woody watches this carefully and feels proud of Jessie because she is finally learning that love does not require control. Jessie's confidence grows as she begins taking more responsibility for the group. She realizes that Woody will not always be there to guide them, and she cannot depend on him forever. Instead of seeing this as frightening, she begins seeing it as an opportunity. She can become the leader in her own way. Her leadership is different from Woody's because she is more willing to admit when she is afraid and ask the others for help. Buzz appreciates this honesty, and their partnership becomes stronger as they work together to protect the group. At the same time, Woody starts thinking more seriously about his own future. His life with Bo Peep has shown him that a toy can find purpose outside the traditional relationship between a child and a favorite toy. He has helped other toys find children and has learned that there are countless ways for a toy to make a difference. Returning to Bonnie's room has reminded him how deeply he cares about his old friends, but it has also confirmed that he cannot stay in one place forever. His future and the future of the other toys may eventually take them in different directions. This possibility makes Jessie emotional. She has become accustomed to having Woody somewhere in the background, even after he left. Knowing that he may eventually leave again forces her to confront an uncomfortable truth. Friendships can survive distance, but they cannot remain exactly the same forever. Woody assures her that leaving does not mean forgetting. He tells her that the toys they have helped and the people they have loved remain part of who they are. Jessie slowly accepts that the strongest friendships do not require everyone to stay together every second. Buzz also experiences a change. His old instinct would have been to declare a mission and immediately rush into action, but he has learned that not every problem can be solved through bravery alone. Sometimes the best thing a toy can do is listen. He becomes more patient with Jessie and more understanding of Bonnie. His friendship with Woody also becomes less dependent on competition. They no longer need to prove who is the better leader. They have become partners who understand each other without needing to explain everything. The other toys begin noticing these changes as well. Some are still worried about what the future holds, but the atmosphere among them becomes more hopeful. Instead of constantly discussing how to defeat Lillipad, they start discussing what they can create. They begin inventing new games and adventures that are suited to Bonnie's current interests. Their stories become more imaginative and less dependent on recreating the games she played when she was younger. One afternoon, Bonnie returns home after a difficult day and immediately reaches for Lillipad. The toys initially become nervous, but they soon realize that Bonnie is not looking for entertainment. She is looking for comfort and someone to talk to. Lillipad listens and helps her organize her thoughts, but eventually Bonnie puts the tablet down and reaches for Jessie. That small moment has a powerful effect on the toys. Jessie understands that Lillipad did not replace her. Instead, Lillipad helped Bonnie through a situation and then allowed Bonnie to choose what she wanted next. For Jessie, this is perhaps the clearest proof that she has misunderstood the situation from the beginning. The toys do not need to be Bonnie's only source of comfort. They simply need to remain part of the emotional world she has created with them. Jessie realizes that her value is not determined by how often Bonnie picks her up. Her value comes from the trust and memories built over time. Lillipad also learns something important from the experience. She begins to understand that helping someone does not always mean keeping them engaged with you. Sometimes helping means knowing when to step back. This is a major change in Lillipad's behavior. She becomes less competitive and more cooperative, and the toys begin treating her as a genuine member of their unusual community. The relationship between Lillipad and Buzz becomes particularly entertaining because their personalities are completely different. Buzz approaches everything with dramatic seriousness, while Lillipad often responds with practical information. Buzz may announce an elaborate plan, only for Lillipad to point out an obvious solution that he overlooked. The other toys laugh at these moments, and even Buzz eventually accepts that having someone different from him around can make the team stronger. Woody enjoys watching these relationships develop. He sees something he has always wanted for the toys: independence. When Andy was growing up, Woody believed his greatest responsibility was protecting the group. Now he understands that protecting someone also means preparing them to stand on their own. Jessie no longer needs Woody to make every decision. Buzz no longer needs Woody to validate every plan. The other toys are becoming capable of creating their own futures. But the peaceful balance does not last forever. Another unexpected problem emerges, reminding the toys that their world is still changing. Bonnie becomes involved in a new activity that requires her to spend more time outside the house. The toys begin worrying that this could mean even less time together. Jessie briefly falls back into her old fear, believing that another part of Bonnie's life is pulling her farther away. This time, however, the other toys help Jessie see the situation differently. Instead of panicking, they encourage her to think about how they can support Bonnie's new experience. Woody reminds her that every new chapter in Bonnie's life is an opportunity to create new memories. Jessie realizes that she can be excited for Bonnie instead of being afraid for herself. The toys begin preparing for Bonnie's new interest, turning ordinary objects into props for imaginative play. They do not know exactly how Bonnie will respond, but they are willing to try. Their efforts show how much they have changed since Lillipad first arrived. In the beginning, they were desperate to protect the past. Now they are willing to help create the future. Bonnie eventually notices the effort and becomes excited. She brings the toys into her new world, combining them with ideas she has discovered through Lillipad and experiences she has had outside the house. The result is something none of the toys could have imagined. Traditional play and modern technology begin working together instead of competing. Lillipad can introduce Bonnie to an idea, while the toys help her turn that idea into an imaginative physical adventure. This becomes the heart of the film's message. Technology is not automatically the enemy of imagination. The real issue is how people use it. A screen can inspire an idea, but imagination gives that idea life. A digital device can provide information, but friendship gives information meaning. Bonnie does not have to abandon one world to enjoy the other. Jessie finally feels at peace with the changes around her. She looks at Bonnie playing with the toys and realizes that the little girl she once knew is still there, even though she is growing into someone new. Bonnie may not play exactly as she did before, but she still has the ability to imagine, laugh, create stories, and form emotional connections. Woody begins preparing to leave again, knowing that his work with Bo Peep will eventually call him away. This time, however, his departure does not feel like an ending. Jessie is ready to continue leading the toys. Buzz is ready to support her, and Lillipad has become an unexpected ally. Woody understands that the group no longer needs him to remain physically present for their friendship to continue. Before leaving, Woody shares one final piece of advice with Jessie. He tells her that the best thing a toy can give a child is not ownership, attention, or constant entertainment. It is the freedom to imagine. Jessie understands exactly what he means. She realizes that her role is not to make Bonnie stay the same. Her role is to be there as Bonnie discovers who she is becoming. As Woody prepares for his next journey, Jessie watches him with mixed emotions. She is sad to see him go, but she is no longer afraid. She knows that their friendship has survived separation before, and it will survive again. The toys have learned that being together is wonderful, but growing independently is also part of their journey. The story now moves toward its emotional climax. The toys have solved their original misunderstanding with Lillipad, but they still have to face the larger reality of Bonnie growing up. Their future remains uncertain, and the possibility of new changes hangs over them. Yet unlike at the beginning of the adventure, they are no longer frightened by uncertainty. They have learned that change can create new possibilities. And as Jessie looks around Bonnie's room, surrounded by old friends, new technology, and the memories of everything they have experienced together, she finally understands what Woody has been trying to teach her all along. Being a toy is not about staying in the same place forever. It is about being part of someone's story, making that story brighter, and knowing that even when the chapter changes, the love behind it can remain. As the story moves forward, Jessie finds herself carrying a responsibility that once belonged almost entirely to Woody. The toys are no longer simply trying to survive another adventure. They are trying to understand what their place will be in Bonnie's changing life. Jessie has grown considerably since Lillipad first arrived. She no longer sees every new interest as a threat, and she no longer believes that being Bonnie's favorite is the only way she can prove her worth. Still, deep inside, she knows that the future will eventually demand difficult choices from all of them. Woody has already experienced the painful transition from being a child's favorite toy to finding a completely new purpose. And now Jessie begins to wonder whether she and the others may someday have to make similar decisions. Bonnie continues developing her relationship with both the traditional toys and Lillipad. The important difference is that she now uses each one for different reasons. When she wants information, communication, or something connected to the digital world, she turns to Lillipad. When she wants to create a story, act out an adventure, or simply escape into her imagination, she turns toward Jessie and the other toys. This balance makes the toys realize that their earlier fear was based on the assumption that Bonnie's love was limited. They had imagined that every new favorite meant one old favorite had to disappear. Now they understand that children can carry many different kinds of love and memories. At the same time, Jessie becomes particularly protective of this new balance. She knows that Bonnie is entering a period where outside influences will become increasingly important. Friends, school, hobbies, technology, and new experiences will all shape her personality. Instead of trying to keep Bonnie focused on the toys, Jessie begins encouraging the others to support her growth. She tells Buzz and the rest of the group that they should not be afraid of Bonnie discovering new things. They should be excited whenever she discovers something that makes her curious. Buzz agrees, although his approach is still characteristically dramatic. He treats every new situation like an important space mission, creating plans and assigning responsibilities to the other toys. His seriousness produces plenty of humor, but beneath the comedy is a genuine desire to protect his friends. Buzz has learned that being brave is not simply running toward danger. Sometimes bravery means accepting that you cannot control the outcome. This is something he struggles with throughout the adventure. Meanwhile, Lillipad becomes more comfortable around the toys. She no longer behaves as if she has to prove her usefulness every moment. Instead, she starts observing the group and learning how their relationships work. She notices how quickly Woody can understand what Jessie is feeling, how Buzz uses humor to hide his worries, and how the smaller toys rely on one another during difficult moments. Lillipad begins to understand that the toys possess something she cannot create automatically, a shared history. That shared history becomes especially important when Bonnie brings the toys into another part of her life. The toys realize that they cannot always remain hidden in her bedroom. Bonnie's world is expanding, and if they want to remain part of her imagination, they have to be prepared to travel with her. This creates another adventure in which Jessie must make quick decisions and protect the group. Woody is nearby, but he deliberately allows Jessie to take control rather than immediately solving the problem himself. At first, Jessie is nervous. She worries that she will make the wrong decision and disappoint everyone. Woody reassures her that leadership is not about knowing exactly what will happen. It is about making the best decision possible with the information you have. Jessie remembers how Woody used to make difficult choices when Andy was growing up, and she realizes that he was not always certain either. He simply trusted his friends and kept moving forward. The group encounters several obstacles that force them to work together. Buzz relies on his physical courage. Jessie uses her ability to think quickly, and the other toys contribute their own unusual talents. Lillipad becomes useful in ways that the traditional toys could never have imagined. Her digital abilities help them understand their surroundings and communicate with Bonnie, while the toys provide the physical creativity and emotional support that Lillipad lacks. Their teamwork becomes a perfect example of the balance they have been trying to create. At one point, Jessie finds herself separated from the others. Instead of immediately panicking, she remembers Woody's advice and begins thinking carefully. She knows the others are counting on her, but she also knows that rushing could make the situation worse. She studies the environment and uses the objects around her creatively. Her solution demonstrates how much she has grown. Earlier in the story, fear would have controlled her decisions. Now she allows herself to feel afraid, without allowing fear to control her. When Jessie eventually reconnects with the others, Buzz is visibly impressed. He tells her that she handled the situation like a true commander, and Jessie laughs at his exaggerated description. The moment is important because it confirms that the toys now see her as their leader. She is not simply replacing Woody, she is creating her own leadership style. Woody watches from a distance and realizes that his friends are ready for a future he once worried they could not handle. This gives him confidence that he can continue his own journey without feeling guilty about leaving them behind. His relationship with Jessie has changed from one of mentor and student into something closer to equals. Jessie no longer needs to ask Woody what she should do. She can make decisions herself and explain them afterward. Bonnie also begins noticing the difference in her toys. She senses that Jessie has become the central figure among them. Even though she does not understand everything that has happened behind the scenes, she starts including Jessie in more of her imaginative activities, giving her new stories and new roles. Jessie realizes that this is exactly what she wanted from the beginning, not to stop Bonnie from changing, but to continue being part of her imagination. The emotional meaning of these moments becomes clearer when Bonnie briefly becomes distracted again by Lillipad. Jessie does not react with jealousy. Instead, she smiles and waits. She knows Bonnie will return when she is ready. This small change in Jessie shows how far she has come. At the beginning of the film, she would have immediately tried to win Bonnie's attention. Now she trusts the bond they share. Lillipad notices Jessie's patience and asks why she is no longer worried. Jessie explains that she finally understands something important. If Bonnie loves the toys because of the memories and imagination they share, then those things cannot simply disappear because Bonnie discovers something new. Lillipad begins to understand this as well. She realizes that her own role is not to compete with the toys, but to coexist with them. The toys begin developing a new tradition. Instead of waiting for Bonnie to choose them, they prepare imaginative adventures that can incorporate her new interests. If Bonnie becomes fascinated by science, the toys create a pretend laboratory. If she becomes interested in exploration, Buzz turns the bedroom into a space station. If she discovers something through Lillipad, Jessie and the others transform that idea into a physical game. The result is a much richer form of play because the digital world and the physical world inspire each other. This also helps Bonnie become more creative. She starts using Lillipad to discover ideas, and then using the toys to act those ideas out. Instead of simply watching or consuming content, she becomes the person creating the story. The toys are delighted because this is what they have always wanted for her. They do not care whether the original idea came from a tablet, a book, a conversation, or a toy. What matters is that Bonnie uses her imagination to turn it into something personal. However, Jessie knows that this peaceful balance cannot last forever. Children continue growing, and every stage brings new challenges. One day Bonnie may no longer want to play with toys at all. Jessie finally accepts this possibility without fear. She tells Buzz that their job is not to guarantee that Bonnie will remain a child forever. Their job is to make the time they have meaningful. Buzz responds in his own humorous way, insisting that a great space ranger does not fear the unknown. Jessie points out that he is a toy, not a space ranger, and Buzz proudly replies that the distinction is irrelevant. The others laugh, and the moment reminds everyone why their friendships matter. Even while facing emotional changes, they can still enjoy being together. Woody prepares to leave once again, but this time his departure is not treated as a painful abandonment. Jessie understands that Woody has a different mission now. He has found purpose helping toys who have been forgotten, and she respects that. Woody tells her that whenever she feels uncertain, she should remember that she already has everything she needs to lead the group. Jessie looks around at Buzz, the other toys, and even Lillipad and realizes that he is right. Before leaving, Woody and Jessie share an emotional goodbye. Their friendship has survived separation, conflict, and change, and it is stronger because of those experiences. Woody does not promise that he will always return immediately whenever there is trouble. Instead, he trusts Jessie to handle whatever comes next. That trust means more to her than any promise could. As Woody moves toward his next adventure, Jessie watches him go with a mixture of sadness and pride. She understands that saying goodbye does not erase a friendship. It simply creates another chapter. She then turns toward the other toys and takes her place as their leader. The story now reaches a new stage. The conflict with Lillipad has transformed into cooperation. Jessie has discovered her own leadership. Buzz has become more emotionally mature, and Woody has found confidence in leaving the group behind. But the biggest challenge still remains. Bonnie herself will continue growing, and the toys must eventually decide what they want their future to look like. For the first time, however, they face that future without fear. They have learned that change does not have to destroy friendship. Sometimes change is what allows friendship to become something deeper. And as Jessie looks toward Bonnie, she realizes that the greatest adventure for a toy may not be keeping a child from growing up, but helping that child become the person they are meant to be. As the story moves into its next chapter, Jessie has fully accepted her role as the leader of Bonnie's toys, but leadership brings a new kind of responsibility. Without Woody constantly guiding the group, Jessie must make decisions for herself and for everyone around her. She begins to understand that the toys' lives are changing just as quickly as Bonnie's. Their old routines no longer feel permanent, and the question of what happens next becomes impossible to ignore. Bonnie still loves them, but her attention is increasingly divided between school, friends, technology, and the many new experiences entering her life. Jessie realizes that the toys cannot stop this process. Instead, they must learn how to remain meaningful while allowing Bonnie to grow. One of the biggest changes is the way the toys think about Lillipad. At the beginning, they saw the tablet as something that had invaded their world. Now they recognize that Lillipad has become part of Bonnie's childhood in her own way. She provides information, entertainment, communication, and a connection to experiences beyond the bedroom. Jessie begins treating Lillipad less like a competitor and more like a member of the team. Their relationship is still unusual, because Lillipad and the toys have completely different abilities, but their differences no longer create fear. In fact, those differences often allow them to solve problems that none of them could handle alone. Bonnie also begins discovering that she can combine these different forms of play. An idea she discovers through Lillipad might become the foundation for an imaginary adventure. With Jessie and Buzz, a story created with her toys might inspire her to search for more information using the tablet. The two worlds begin influencing each other, and this gives Bonnie a richer experience than either one could provide by itself. The toys are relieved because they finally understand that they do not need to compete for every second of Bonnie's attention. They simply need to remain part of the world she creates. Jessie's greatest challenge comes when Bonnie begins spending more time away from home. Her schedule becomes busier, and the toys have fewer opportunities to interact with her. At first, Jessie feels the familiar fear returning. She watches Bonnie leave and wonders whether the next stage of her life will gradually push the toys into the background. Buzz notices her expression and reminds her of everything she has learned. Jessie knows he is right, but accepting change is still difficult. She realizes that understanding something intellectually does not mean the emotions disappear immediately. Instead of hiding her feelings, Jessie talks openly with the other toys. This becomes an important moment for the group because they realize they are all experiencing similar worries. Even the toys that usually make jokes begin admitting that they are afraid of being forgotten. Jessie tells them that they cannot control how Bonnie's interests develop, but they can control how they respond. If they spend all their time worrying about the future, they will miss the moments they still have with Bonnie. The toys decide to make those moments meaningful rather than frequent. When Bonnie comes home, they do not desperately try to get her attention. Instead, they wait for opportunities to create something special. Their patience eventually pays off. Bonnie begins seeking them out when she wants to relax and use her imagination. The relationship feels different from when she was younger, but it is also more mature. She no longer needs the toys to entertain her constantly. She chooses to play with them because she genuinely enjoys the experience. Buzz notices that Bonnie has started creating more complicated stories. The adventures she invents now include ideas from school, science, friendships, and things she has discovered through Lillipad. Buzz finds himself playing roles that are more sophisticated than the simple hero missions he once expected. He embraces the change enthusiastically, turning every new role into another opportunity for adventure. Jessie laughs at his dramatic behavior, but she secretly appreciates how easily Buzz can find excitement in change. Meanwhile, Lillipad begins to understand something about friendship that she had never considered before. Her original purpose was to respond to Bonnie's needs quickly and efficiently, but the toys teach her that friendship is not always about solving a problem. Sometimes friends simply sit together. Sometimes they laugh at something that makes no sense. Sometimes they remember something from years ago that nobody else understands. These shared memories are what make the toys special to Bonnie. Lillipad becomes curious about the toys' memories. She asks Jessie why they are so attached to moments that happened long ago. Jessie explains that memories give their relationship meaning. A toy is not special because of its physical appearance alone. It becomes special because a child gives it a story. Jessie remembers how she became part of Bonnie's life and how many adventures they have shared. These memories cannot be copied or downloaded. They exist because they happened between two people, or, in this case, between a child and her toys. This idea helps Lillipad understand why she cannot simply replace the toys. She can provide new experiences, but she cannot recreate years of shared history. Instead of feeling threatened by that fact, she begins appreciating it. She realizes that her own place in Bonnie's life can develop naturally without competing against memories she did not create. The group eventually faces another unexpected problem when something important to Bonnie is misplaced. The toys immediately want to help, but Jessie insists that they think carefully before acting. She has learned that rushing into danger is not always the best solution. Buzz proposes a plan, Lillipad provides useful information, and Jessie organizes everyone. Their cooperation demonstrates how far the group has come since the beginning of the story. During the search, the toys are forced to move through an unfamiliar environment. Ordinary objects become enormous obstacles, and the group must use creativity to continue. Jessie remains focused, but she also depends on the others instead of trying to solve everything herself. Buzz protects the group when necessary, while the smaller toys contribute ideas that might otherwise be overlooked. Lillipad helps them understand where they need to go, but she also learns that information alone is not enough. The toys have to physically act on that information. Eventually, their teamwork allows them to solve the problem. Bonnie never realizes how much effort her toys have made behind the scenes, but that does not matter to Jessie. She has finally understood that being a toy is often about helping without receiving recognition. Woody had taught her this lesson long ago, and now she is beginning to live by it. When Bonnie discovers the missing object, she is relieved and happy. She spends time with Jessie and the other toys afterward, creating a small game around the experience. The toys realize that even an ordinary day can become a memory if they approach it with imagination. This reinforces the central idea that childhood is not defined by expensive toys, advanced technology, or constant entertainment. It is defined by the meaning children create from ordinary moments. Jessie later finds herself alone for a moment and thinks about Woody. She remembers how frightened she was when he first left and how certain she was that his absence would change everything. Now she sees that his departure actually gave her the opportunity to discover her own strength. She misses him, but she no longer sees his absence as a weakness. His trust helped her become the leader she needed to be. The other toys begin discussing their own futures. Some want to remain with Bonnie as long as possible. Others are curious about what life might be like beyond her bedroom. Jessie listens carefully rather than giving them one answer. She understands that every toy has a different relationship with Bonnie and, therefore, a different idea of what their future should be. There is no single correct path. This becomes another important lesson from Woody. He never told Jessie that every toy must leave a child eventually. He simply showed her that when the right moment comes, a toy should be willing to consider what comes next. Jessie now understands that the group's future cannot be forced. They will know when it is time to make another decision. Bonnie continues growing, but she still finds comfort in her toys. One evening, she sits with Jessie and the others and begins creating a new story. The story combines everything she has been experiencing: friendship, exploration, technology, and imagination. The toys become characters in her invented world, while Lillipad becomes part of the adventure in her own unusual way. For the toys, this is a beautiful sign that Bonnie has not abandoned the kind of imagination they represent. She has simply expanded it. Jessie watches Bonnie's creativity and realizes that the toys have succeeded. They were never supposed to keep Bonnie exactly as she was. Their purpose was to help her become more imaginative, confident, and capable of seeing possibilities. Now Bonnie is creating those possibilities herself. The emotional weight of the story becomes stronger as Jessie recognizes that one day this may happen without them. Bonnie may eventually stop playing with toys altogether. That possibility still makes Jessie sad, but it no longer terrifies her. She knows that the memories they created will remain part of Bonnie's childhood. Even if the toys eventually sit quietly somewhere, they will have already accomplished what they were meant to do. Lillipad also becomes more comfortable with the idea that she may not always be Bonnie's favorite digital companion. She has learned that relationships change. She no longer needs to be constantly useful to feel important. Her friendship with the toys gives her a new understanding of what it means to be part of someone's life. By the end of this chapter, the toys are no longer divided into old and new. They are simply a group of friends trying to support the same child. Woody may be traveling elsewhere. Jessie is leading the group. Buzz remains the enthusiastic hero, and Lillipad has become an unexpected ally. Bonnie continues moving forward into the next stage of her childhood, carrying all these different influences with her. The toys now understand that their greatest strength has never been their ability to remain unchanged. It has been their ability to adapt while protecting the love and imagination that brought them together in the first place. And although they know more changes are coming, they are ready to face them. The next challenge will force Jessie to make one of the most important decisions of her life as a toy, and it will test whether the lessons she has learned are strong enough to guide her when the future finally arrives. As the story moves forward, Jessie begins to feel that the toys have reached a turning point. Bonnie is becoming more independent, and the comfortable routine they once knew is slowly disappearing. There are still moments when Bonnie plays with Jessie, Buzz, and the other toys, but those moments are no longer predictable. Sometimes days pass without Bonnie opening the toy chest, and at other times she suddenly returns to her old friends and creates an enormous imaginary adventure. Jessie has learned not to panic when this happens, but she cannot completely ignore the question that has been growing inside her. What will happen to the toys when Bonnie's childhood continues moving forward? Woody's influence remains strong even though he is no longer permanently living with the group. Jessie often remembers his advice whenever she faces a difficult decision. He taught her that a toy should never measure its value only by how often a child plays with it. Instead, the toy should think about the memories it has created and the comfort it has provided. Jessie understands the lesson better now, but the emotional reality becomes harder when she sees Bonnie changing in front of her. She begins wondering whether staying with Bonnie forever is really the best thing for everyone. Buzz notices that Jessie is becoming unusually quiet. He asks her what is bothering her, and Jessie finally admits that she has been thinking about the future. She tells Buzz that she is afraid the toys might eventually become forgotten objects in a room rather than active parts of Bonnie's life. Buzz responds with his usual confidence, saying that being a toy is not about guaranteeing the future. It is about being ready for whatever mission comes next. Jessie laughs at the dramatic description, but she realizes that there is wisdom behind his words. Meanwhile, Bonnie becomes interested in a new activity that takes much of her attention. The toys initially worrying that this will push them even farther into the background, but Jessie refuses to let the group fall back into its old pattern of fear. Instead, she encourages everyone to support Bonnie. If she is excited about something new, the toys should be excited for her. This attitude allows them to enjoy watching Bonnie discover another part of herself, rather than seeing every new experience as a threat. Lillipad becomes especially helpful during this period. She helps Bonnie explore her new interest, but she also begins encouraging her to step away from the screen and experience things directly. The tablet has changed significantly since the beginning of the story. She no longer sees her usefulness as a competition with the toys. She understands that Bonnie needs different kinds of experiences, and she has become comfortable sharing her place with Jessie and the others. One evening, Bonnie returns home feeling tired and frustrated. Instead of immediately reaching for Lillipad, she sits quietly with Jessie. The moment is simple, but it means a great deal to the toys. Jessie realizes that there are certain moments when Bonnie does not need information or entertainment. She simply needs something familiar. Jessie cannot solve every problem, but she can provide a sense of comfort. That is something no digital feature can automatically reproduce it. Experience strengthens Jessie's confidence. She finally understands that the relationship between a child and a toy is not always about action. Sometimes the most important thing a toy can do is simply be present. Jessie begins thinking about Woody again and realizes that his greatest strength was never his ability to save everyone. It was his ability to understand what people needed emotionally. As the toys continue adapting, another challenge brings the entire group together. Their surroundings become unexpectedly complicated, and the toys must work as a team to protect one another. Jessie takes command, but this time she does not feel the need to prove herself. She trusts Buzz and the other toys to handle their responsibilities. Lillipad also contributes information that helps the group understand the situation. What once would have been an argument between the traditional toys and the tablet is now a cooperative effort. During the adventure, Jessie is forced to make a difficult choice. She has an opportunity to protect herself, but doing so could leave another toy in danger. Without hesitation, she chooses to help her friend. The decision demonstrates how much she has changed. Earlier, her fear of being forgotten sometimes made her selfish or impulsive. Now she understands that being a good leader means putting friendship before personal security. Buzz helps Jessie complete the rescue, and the group eventually reunites. The experience reminds everyone that their friendship is their greatest strength. They may have different personalities and different abilities, but they trust one another. Lillipad also realizes that she has become part of that trust. She is no longer an outsider watching the toys from a distance. She is someone they depend on. When the toys return to Bonnie's room, Jessie begins thinking seriously about what Woody would do. She realizes that he would not tell her what decision to make. He would simply remind her that the answer has to come from her own heart. Jessie understands that she has been waiting for someone else to tell her what the future should look like. Now she knows that she has to decide for herself. The possibility of leaving Bonnie becomes more real. Jessie does not immediately decide to go, because she still feels deeply connected to her, but she begins imagining a future in which she might help another child or another forgotten toy. She thinks about Woody and Bo Peep and the toys they have encountered on their journeys. Perhaps her purpose could eventually expand beyond one bedroom. At the same time, Jessie realizes that leaving too early would be just as wrong as refusing to leave forever. Bonnie still has a meaningful relationship with her toys, and Jessie does not want to abandon that relationship simply because she is afraid of what the future might bring. She decides that the timing matters. A toy should move forward when the moment is right, not simply because change feels frightening. This becomes one of the most emotional lessons of the story. Growing up does not mean running away from the past. It means knowing when to carry the past with you and when to create something new. Jessie has spent much of the story worrying that Bonnie's growth means the end of their relationship. Now she understands that their relationship can evolve. Bonnie also begins showing signs that she understands her toys differently. She treats Jessie less like an object and more like an old friend. She talks to her, includes her in imaginative stories, and occasionally keeps her close when she is nervous. These small actions reassure Jessie that the bond they share remains strong even though Bonnie is changing. Lillipad watches these moments and begins to understand why the toys are so important. She has helped Bonnie discover new things, but she cannot replace the history that exists between Bonnie and her toys. Instead of feeling threatened by that history, she becomes proud to be part of a world where different kinds of relationships can exist together. Buzz, meanwhile, starts joking that the group has become an unusually complicated team. There are traditional toys, a digital device, a wandering cowboy, and a growing child whose interests change every few weeks. The others laugh because he is right. Their world is no longer the simple toy box universe they once knew. It has become something much larger. The emotional climax of this chapter arrives when Jessie is finally forced to consider what she would do if Bonnie stopped playing with her completely. She imagines herself sitting quietly in the toy chest while Bonnie moves into a new stage of life. The thought still hurts, but Jessie no longer sees it as failure. She realizes that if she has given Bonnie years of happiness, imagination, and comfort, then she has already fulfilled an important purpose. Woody eventually returns for a brief reunion with the group. Jessie shares her thoughts with him, expecting him to give her an answer. Instead, Woody smiles and tells her that he once faced the same question. He explains that there is no perfect moment when a toy suddenly knows exactly what to do. Sometimes the answer becomes clear only after you are willing to accept that every chapter eventually changes. Jessie finally understands. She does not need to decide her entire future today. She can remain with Bonnie for as long as their relationship continues to feel meaningful, while remaining open to whatever comes afterward. This gives her a sense of peace she has not experienced since the beginning of the story. Before Woody leaves again, he reminds Jessie that she has become a leader capable of making her own choices. He no longer sees her as someone who needs to be protected. He sees her as someone ready to protect others. Jessie is emotional, but she smiles because she knows that his confidence in her is genuine. The toys then return to their familiar place, but everything feels different. The bedroom looks the same, yet their understanding of it is changed. It is no longer a permanent home. It is simply one chapter in their journey. Bonnie is growing, Lillipad is becoming part of the family, and the toys are discovering that their future can take many forms. Jessie looks at the group and realizes that whatever happens next, they will face it together. She does not know whether Bonnie will continue playing with them for years or whether another major change is approaching, but she no longer fears uncertainty. She has learned that the true purpose of friendship is not to prevent change. It is to give people the courage to face it. And as Bonnie begins another imaginative game, Jessie steps forward to join her. For that moment, nothing else matters. The future can wait. What matters is the memory they are creating right now. As the story enters its final stage, the toys begin to realize that the greatest lesson of their adventure has not been about defeating technology or protecting their place in Bonnie's room. It has been about accepting that childhood is always moving forward. Bonnie is becoming more independent, and the toys can no longer expect their relationship with her to remain exactly as it was when she was younger. Jessie has become much more comfortable with this reality, but she still. Bonnie understands when it is time to put the device away. Instead of constantly asking for Bonnie's attention, Lillipad becomes more supportive of Bonnie's real-world activities. This makes the relationship between Lillipad and the traditional toys stronger. They are no longer competing for the same role because they have discovered that their roles are different. Woody returns once again during an important moment, and his presence brings a mixture of excitement and emotion. Jessie is happy to see him, but she also notices something different about herself. She no longer feels that Woody must stay permanently for the group to be safe. She welcomes him as a friend rather than depending on him as a leader. Woody recognizes this immediately and feels proud. The reunion also gives the toys an opportunity to discuss their future. Woody explains that he and Bo Peep continue helping toys who have been separated from children. Their work has shown him that there are many toys who need someone to guide them through difficult transitions. He asks Jessie whether she has ever considered doing something similar. Jessie hesitates because she still wants to remain with Bonnie, but the question plants an important idea in her mind. Jessie begins wondering whether helping other toys could eventually become part of her future. She imagines traveling with Buzz and the others, meeting toys who have been forgotten, and helping them discover new possibilities. But she also knows that leaving Bonnie would be an enormous decision. She does not want to make the choice because of fear or because she thinks she has to follow Woody. If she ever leaves, it must be because the time is genuinely right. Bonnie then gives Jessie an unexpected reminder of why their relationship matters. She brings Jessie into a quiet moment and talks to her as though she were a close friend. She explains that she sometimes worries about growing up and changing. Jessie cannot respond in a way Bonnie can hear, but the moment deeply affects her. For the first time, Jessie realizes that Bonnie may also be afraid of change. The child and the toy are experiencing the same uncertainty from opposite sides. This realization changes everything. Jessie understands that Bonnie does not need her to stop growing. She needs someone who represents the safety of her childhood while she moves into something new. The toys become symbols of continuity in Bonnie's life. They remind her that even though everything changes, some memories remain part of who she is. Jessie decides that her immediate responsibility is to stay. She is not ready to leave, and more importantly, Bonnie still has something meaningful to share with her. Jessie realizes that the best decision is not always the most dramatic one. Sometimes staying can be just as courageous as. The challenge forces Jessie to make another difficult decision, but this time she does not act out of fear. She chooses the option that benefits Bonnie and the group, even though it may mean sacrificing something personally important to her. This proves that Jessie has finally become the leader Woody always believed she could be. When the situation is resolved, the toys return safely. Bonnie is happy, though she does not fully understand everything that happened. She simply knows that something important has been restored to her world. She gathers her toys together and begins another imaginative adventure. Jessie watches Bonnie and realizes that this may be one of the last periods of childhood when everything feels completely magical. Instead of becoming sad, she decides to appreciate it. She no longer spends her time counting how many minutes Bonnie plays with her. She simply enjoys every moment. Woody sees this transformation and understands that Jessie has found the answer she was searching for. She does not need to know exactly what her future will look like. She only needs to be ready when the next chapter arrives. The toys also begin thinking differently about the idea of being forgotten. Being placed in a toy chest does not necessarily mean that their lives have ended. A toy can remain meaningful even when it is not being used. Sometimes children return to old toys years later and discover that the memories attached to them are still powerful. The toys begin seeing the future as an open door rather than a final goodbye. Bonnie's relationship with Lillipad also reaches a healthier balance. She continues using the tablet, but she no longer feels that she has to spend every free moment with it. She goes outside, spends time with friends, creates games with her toys, and uses technology as one part of her life rather than the entire center of it. The toys are relieved to see this change, but they do not take credit for it. They understand that Bonnie herself is learning how to make choices. The emotional heart of the story becomes clear. Growing up is not about abandoning everything from childhood. It is about carrying the best parts of childhood forward. Bonnie can continue discovering new technology while keeping her imagination. She can make new friends while remembering old ones. She can change without erasing who she used to be. Jessie finally feels at peace. She looks around the room at Buzz, the other toys, and Lillipad and understands that they have become something bigger than a collection of toys. They are a family formed through years of shared experiences. Their individual futures may eventually separate them, but their memories will continue connecting them. Woody prepares to leave once again, but this goodbye feels different. Jessie does not cling to him or ask him to stay. She simply tells him that she will see him again. Woody smiles because he knows she means it. Their friendship no longer depends on physical closeness. Jessie has changed more than anyone else. At the beginning, she was frightened that Bonnie's attachment to Lillipad meant she was being replaced. Now she understands that love is not a competition. Bonnie can enjoy technology, make new friends, discover new interests, and still have a deep emotional connection with the toys who have been part of her life for years. Jessie no longer measures her importance by how often Bonnie picks her up. Instead, she values the quiet moments when Bonnie chooses her because she wants comfort, imagination, or simply the feeling of being with an old friend. Buzz has also learned an important lesson. His instinct has always been to treat problems like missions, but this adventure has shown him that some challenges cannot be solved with bravery alone. Understanding another person's feelings can be more important than defeating an enemy. He becomes one of Jessie's strongest supporters, trusting her decisions and helping her lead the group. Their friendship becomes one of the most important relationships in the story because they demonstrate that leadership does not have to belong to one person forever. Lillipad, meanwhile, has completely changed from the character the toys first feared. She no longer sees herself as Bonnie's replacement for traditional toys. She understands that her strengths are different. She can connect Bonnie to information, communication, and new experiences, but she cannot replace the emotional history Bonnie shares with Jessie and the other toys. Instead of competing with them, Lillipad becomes part of the larger world surrounding Bonnie. She learns that sometimes the best way to help someone is to give them the freedom to step away from you. Bonnie herself becomes more confident as she learns how to balance the different parts of her life. She still enjoys using Lillipad, but she also spends time creating stories with her toys, talking with friends, exploring new interests, and experiencing the world outside a screen. The toys are happy to see that Bonnie is learning to use technology as a tool, rather than allowing it to control every part of her attention. This balance becomes one of the most meaningful lessons of the entire adventure. One of the most emotional moments comes when Jessie realizes how much Bonnie has changed since they first became part of each other's lives. Jessie remembers Bonnie as a much younger child and compares that memory with the confident girl standing before her now. There is a natural sadness in realizing that childhood cannot last forever. But Jessie no longer sees growing up as something tragic. She sees it as evidence that Bonnie is becoming the person she was always meant to become. Woody returns to spend time with the group once more, and the reunion feels different from their earlier meetings. Jessie no longer looks at Woody as the person who must rescue them. She sees him as an old friend who has his own journey. Woody is proud of her because she has become exactly the kind of leader he hoped she would become. He tells her that he never wanted her to become another version of him. He wanted her to discover who she was on her own. Jessie finally understands that this is what Woody has been trying to teach her throughout their entire journey. A toy's life is not defined by one child, one bedroom, or one chapter. Toys can have many lives and many purposes. What matters is the love they give and the memories they leave behind. The group then faces one last challenge that requires everyone to work together. The situation reminds them of the adventures they experienced in earlier years, but this time they approach the problem with much greater maturity. Jessie leads without becoming controlling. Buzz helps without taking over. Lillipad contributes information without demanding attention. The other toys work together instead of waiting for someone else to solve everything. Their success comes not from one hero but from the entire group cooperating. This reflects how much they have changed. At the beginning, everyone was focused on protecting their individual place in Bonnie's life. Now they understand that they are stronger when they support one another. When the challenge is finally over, Bonnie returns to her toys and begins creating another imaginative story. She combines ideas from the world around her with characters she has loved for years. Jessie becomes one of the central characters, while Buzz once again turns himself into an exaggerated hero. The other toys join in, and even Lillipad becomes part of the adventure. What once seemed impossible has become completely natural. The scene represents the new relationship between technology and imagination. Lillipad is not destroying the toys' world. She is simply another part of Bonnie's world. The toys have not lost their identity, and Bonnie has not lost her creativity. Instead, both sides have learned to coexist. As Bonnie continues playing, Jessie looks around at her friends. She realizes that this ordinary moment is exactly what she had been trying to protect. Not the past, not the toy chest, and not the idea of being Bonnie's favorite, but this feeling of connection. Bonnie is laughing, imagining, and creating something that exists only because she has chosen to play. Woody watches from nearby and quietly smiles. He knows that Jessie no longer needs his protection. She has found her own confidence, and the group is ready for whatever comes next. He and Bo Peep still have their own journey, helping toys who need a new direction. But Woody knows that he can leave this group with peace in his heart. The goodbye between Woody and Jessie is emotional but hopeful. Jessie tells him that she finally understands why he left before. Woody explains that leaving is never easy, but sometimes a toy has to follow the path that feels right. Jessie tells him that she will always remember everything he taught her. Woody responds that she has already taught him something too, that a new generation can take the lessons of the past and create something completely different. Buzz joins the goodbye, and his friendship with Woody brings a final touch of humor. They remember how strange their first meeting was and laugh at how unlikely it seemed that they would ever become close friends. Their journey together has lasted through countless changes, and neither of them knows exactly where the future will lead, but they know they will always be connected by the memories they share. Woody then leaves, and Jessie watches him disappear into the distance. For a brief moment, she feels the sadness she once felt when he first left, but this time, she does not fall apart. She turns around and sees the other toys waiting for her. Buzz smiles, the others are ready, and Lillipad is nearby. Jessie realizes that saying goodbye does not mean being alone. Back in Bonnie's room, the toys settle into their familiar places. Everything appears peaceful again, but they know that the future will continue changing. Bonnie will grow older. Her interests will change again. She may eventually spend less time with them, but none of that frightens Jessie anymore. She has finally learned that a toy's greatest purpose is not to remain someone's favorite forever. It is to be there when it matters, to inspire imagination, to provide comfort, and to create memories that can last long after the toy is no longer being played with every day. Lillipad has learned a similar lesson. She no longer tries to capture Bonnie's attention constantly. Instead, she waits until Bonnie needs her. When Bonnie wants to explore something digitally, Lillipad is ready. When Bonnie wants to imagine a world of her own, the toys are ready. The two forms of play now exist side by side. Bonnie eventually puts her tablet down and begins another game with Jessie and Buzz. The toys immediately become characters. In her story, Jessie smiles as she realizes that Bonnie is still the same child at heart. Even though she is growing into a more independent person, her imagination has not disappeared. It has simply become more sophisticated. The final emotional message becomes clear. Growing up does not mean forgetting everything that came before. It means taking those memories with you and allowing them to become part of the person you are becoming. Bonnie's toys have helped shape her childhood, and their influence will remain even as her interests continue changing. Jessie looks at the other toys and tells them that they do not need to be afraid of tomorrow. Whatever happens, they will face it together. Some may stay, some may. As the story continues beyond the major conflict, Jessie and the other toys enter a quieter stage of their journey. They have survived the fear that came with Lillipad's arrival, learned to work alongside something completely different from themselves, and discovered that Bonnie's growing independence does not automatically mean the end of their relationship with her. But there is still one final emotional lesson for Jessie to understand. She has spent so much of her life worrying about being abandoned that she has sometimes forgotten to appreciate the time she actually has. Now, instead of constantly asking what will happen tomorrow, she begins concentrating on what is happening today. Bonnie's behavior reflects this change. She is still curious about the digital world, but she also continues returning to her toys whenever she wants to create something personal. Her imagination has become more sophisticated, and the games she invents are no longer simple childhood adventures. She creates stories with complicated characters, unexpected problems, and emotional moments. Jessie realizes that Bonnie is not leaving imagination behind. She is carrying it with her as she grows. Buzz becomes fascinated by Bonnie's stories and immediately gives himself an heroic role. He treats every imaginary challenge as a serious mission, which makes the other toys laugh. Jessie reminds him that they are supposed to follow Bonnie's story rather than take over, and Buzz reluctantly agrees. This small moment demonstrates how much he has changed. The old Buzz would have insisted on being the hero, but the new Buzz understands that the most important thing is helping Bonnie tell her own story. And that brings us to the end of our complete explanation of Toy Story 5. This emotional adventure is much more than a story about toys competing with a new piece of technology. It is a story about friendship, change, imagination, and the difficult process of growing up. Jessie learns that she does not have to be Bonnie's only favorite toy to remain important, while Buzz discovers that true leadership means trusting others and accepting change. Lillipad also learns that she does not need to replace the toys. She can become part of Bonnie's world in her own way. Most importantly, the story reminds us that growing up does not mean forgetting the people, memories, and experiences that made our childhood special. Sometimes the most meaningful relationships change their form, but the emotions behind them remain forever. If you enjoyed this complete explanation, make sure to like the video, share it with other movie fans, and subscribe to the channel for more movie explanations, reviews, stories, and upcoming film content. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video with another amazing story.